Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Joey Rashid. He is the CISO and VP of Information Technology. Welcome, Joey.
Hey, thank you for having me, Pete.
Well, thanks for being here. I think we know some of the same people, so always good to catch up.
Yes.
Could you give our audience some background on yourself, though?
Yeah, sure. I started my career in the United States Marine Corps, not in cybersecurity. I started out doing physical security for the Presidential Helicopter Squadron. And then after my service, around 2002 is when I got out of the military. And back then, cybersecurity wasn't as competitive as it is today. And basically, I got to dip my toe in cybersecurity and have been in cyber ever since. I did a good decade working with the government as a contractor, supporting organizations like U.S. Cyber Command and the Pentagon, leading cybersecurity programs for those organizations. And then after doing a bit of that service, I jumped into the private sector and have been serving in that sector in cybersecurity leadership roles for the past 15 plus years. As you mentioned, I am a CISO and a lead of information technology, but my passion is really in leading people and building high-performing teams. I do believe firmly that when you take care of your teams and you take care of your people and you build relationships, that's where really the rubber meets the road with success and being able to influence across organizations and also just providing meaningful work for your team.
Yeah, and the less challenges you'll have in hiring over the long term as you go from company to company as well. It seems like the best hiring managers I've talked to, they tend to almost have a bit of a tribe that tends to follow them wherever they go. And really, that's, I think, the ideal setup. You don't have to go out to the market and pay top dollar for the unicorns if they're following you everywhere you go.
Yeah.
What about the talent gap? Do you think that's a real thing? And if so, what would you say it looks like?
So this is a topic that is an interesting one to me, and I think we've chatted about this before in just some of the circles that we run in. I don't know. I definitely think there's a talent issue, but I think we really need to perceive it from a different perspective. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned in my intro, someone gave me a chance to get into cyber. Like, I showed some abilities and some values to be a successful cybersecurity professional. And leaders back then, although granted it wasn't maybe as competitive as today, but I think the thing still rings true is that someone saw the values and abilities and said, we'll train Joey to do the rest. And I think what we need to do in our industry is have that same mentality and realize that, there aren't the unicorns out there. And that we need to hire for values and abilities, and we need to understand that we need to train for skills. And if we look at it from that perspective, in my mind, then the talent gap is less. Because then you'll realize that there's actually a burden of leadership to say, I can't expect people to come with 3 years of experience for an entry-level role. The reality is you should hire people who have some talent and then train them to build the skills to fill those, junior level, mid-level roles. Now, I get it at the, senior level and such. I think there's a lot of people on the market today that I speak with, even though, and that I mentor, that are like, I'm fully qualified for these positions, but I'm not getting through, the funnel and so forth. And that's where building your network definitely helps and so forth. But anyways, I'll pause there to maybe get your perspective. You're in this space a lot more, helping firms recruit for talent, and like, what do you see from your side in your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we essentially have as an industry is a giant matching problem. We have this vast proliferation of candidates on the market, both inexperienced and experienced, on the magnitude of maybe 100,000 people right now, easily, I would say, in security that are currently on the market. Then we have this proliferation of jobs, and it's certainly gone up. We're recording this in late Q1 of 2024, And I've seen a massive explosion in number of openings relative to the end of the year, 2023. So there's a lot of jobs right now. Maybe not as many as, say, a year and a half ago, but there's still, a fair amount of open jobs. But as you had alluded to, there's really highly qualified people that have good soft skills, that have, good relationships and references and things like that can't find roles right now. And I think it really, the process breaks down. I think it's a people and a process problem. I talk about this often. I don't think it's a technology problem. There's this, massive misconception that AI is auto filtering out resumes and it's rejecting people. Ultimately, there's just too many candidates for each open job. I think recruiters default to posting jobs because they don't know what else to do. They don't have necessarily, in a lot of cases, the depth of experience in, say, security to really understand the roles that they're recruiting for. So they default to posting a job and seeing what comes in. But then inevitably they miss out on some good people. One, because they have hundreds or thousands of applicants, and two, because they don't have a well-defined sense of exactly what they're screening out, screening in, and what they're looking for. So, and I think a lot of that flows from, especially in a market like this, I think everybody's or a lot of teams are running lean. Hiring managers are running lean. They're stretched on resources and budget and time, and they have a hard time investing the time to educate the recruiters, the HR team, whomever is on the front end of the process. Here's what we need to be doing strategy-wise, or they may not know because they're not recruiters, or they have a hard time educating the recruiters, or maybe the recruiters just don't understand. Maybe they're not really cut out to understand technical roles. I've certainly seen that as a recruiter myself. I think not every recruiter has the capacity necessarily to understand certain positions. And some recruiters are better suited to working on finance and accounting positions. Some are better suited to working on IT and security positions. And so there might be a matching problem there as well. So all of that to say, I think it's a multifaceted issue. I do think, at least in my mind, the talent gap is relatively self-inflicted. I think there is some sort of gap, but it's kind of amorphous. It's hard to define, and it's all over the place. But a lot of it's one process.
But like you said, Pete, I mean, there's talent all around us. And I'll tell you a story about, when I was at the Pentagon, there was a person that was in our front office for the CISO of the Pentagon. And this person approached our team and said, I'm really interested in cybersecurity. What do I need to do to break into this field? And this person was highly talented, had great soft skills, was the executive EA to, again, the CISO and CIO and things like that. So phenomenal person. And we basically told this person, say, go get this entry-level certification. And once you get that, we will get you on the contract and teach you the rest. And we, that person held up their end of the bargain, went and got that certification because they were driven, they were hungry, they showed great work ethic. And that's part of the equation, right? You show me that you're willing to step up, and then I'm going to, meet my end of the bargain. And we put that person on the contract. And now that person, I look at their LinkedIn, and they're a director of cybersecurity for a very large government contracting firm in the Washington, D.C. area. That's just a story of where we need to realize that there's talent all around us. What we need to look for, those soft skills, the things that you can't train, the values and the abilities, and then realize that it's our job as leaders to make a home for that person on the team and then train them. And if you do that, you're going to raise the bar for the rest of the team. You're going to bring new talent, and you're going to fresh talent and junior talent, really makes everyone rise to the occasion. I've seen that time and time again, and that's another tangent that maybe we can get on. But that's the way I try to look at it. And I think a lot of other hiring managers need to look at it that way too. And then they'll realize that maybe there isn't as much of a talent gap with regards to the entry-level roles and the junior-level positions, where we just need to train a little bit more.
I think the issue too is everybody says kind of in their particular position, in their situation, they can't afford to hire somebody junior. So I think what often happens is we have this open spot on our team. We need X, Y, and Z skills for this person to have. They need to have this baseline level of knowledge on day one to be able to do the job. Else they're risking our security as a company. So what do you do in that situation when you need somebody to fill those specific skills, and maybe you think you can't justify hiring somebody junior? I think that happens a lot, and that's why we're not seeing as many of those, junior and entry level roles.
Well, I mean, what I would argue then, and that's not an entry level role that you're speaking of. If you need someone to come in with 5 years of experience in a certain area, that's not, to me, an entry level position. That's a mid level position where you're coming with those skills already. But if you're truly, like if you have a internship program and you bring interns in during the summer and you train them, and then the next year you bring them back for full-time positions, like that's an interesting talent cycle that you can look at. And we did that, in government contracting, especially at the Pentagon. We went out and hired interns, got them their clearances. They did 3 or 4 months with us, and then they went back to school. And then when they graduated the next, round, we hired them full time. And so, like, I think the thing you describe is like, that's not entry level to me. It's kind of like if I think about other career fields, someone goes to law school, they pass the bar, and they come in as an associate. Like, no one's telling them that, hey, you need to have 3 years of experience litigating. No, because they went to law school, they passed the bar, and they're coming in, they're going to be trained by senior associates and partners and others across the firm or the staff to gain those skills. But in cybersecurity, we're posting, I feel like, entry-level positions saying that you need a CISP. Well, how do you get a CISP as an entry-level position if you actually need 5 years of experience to even get the CISP? So it's like the cart before the horse type scenario. So I think we really just need to reevaluate. Can I bring in talent that has the right soft skills and train them? And if not, let's not call it entry level. Let's just call it what it is. I don't know, Pio. I mean, what do you see on your side? Like, I mean, I don't know. That's the conundrum maybe that we're facing right now.
Yeah, I think there's not really a market need for a lot of juniors, I think, is the main problem. There's just more of a need for every organization out there. Any gaps they have in knowledge, it's not at the entry level, because inherently those folks don't have much knowledge, and you do need to train that. So, if there's a gap on a team, the default is, well, we can't wait to train somebody up to get them to the point where they're going to be able to contribute in this way. We need somebody that can quote unquote hit the ground running. And if everybody hires that way, we're all going to be worse off, So it's kind of a catch-22, really.
But that's where I think some of the most successful organizations do have entry-level positions, maybe by way of internship programs, where they bring talent in, they train them, they put them in internship roles where they can, they don't need to hit the ground running. They can learn, they can be a sponge and soak it all in, go back to school for another semester or two, and then graduate and come back and then hit the ground sort of running. Yeah, I mean, I've worked at organizations like that in my past. When I was at PwC, we hired a ton from college because we PwC and the Big Four likes to hire and train the right talent and abilities, or with the right skills and abilities, soft skills and things like that. And then they put them through a very rigorous training program. And then, they learn on projects and programs and special initiatives and things like that. I just think like us as leaders need to realize that we're creating some of our own problem, and that in order to stop complaining about a talent gap, we need to reflect in the mirror and say, hey, like, am I part of this problem, and how do I help contribute to fix it by doing some of the things that I just mentioned and things that you just mentioned? Otherwise, it's going to continue to get worse and worse, and we're going to continue to complain, but not do anything about it to actually change the cycle, right? Like, we have to change the beast that we've created.
Yeah, you have to reverse the momentum at some point. The snowball is rolling downhill. It's kind of like what's happening in the broader culture with population collapse. It's kind of the same way with security skills right now. Yeah, and then it could get even worse with AI coming to the forefront. If that gets better and better, and then we don't have as many quote unquote grunt work type of jobs for people to do because that's being taken over by automation, then boom, there goes that talent pipeline. So how else are we going to get people to the senior level of knowledge that they need to have to be able to contribute to these types of organizations? Yeah, it's interesting you bring up consulting firms and how they've traditionally done a pretty good job of building those campus recruiting programs. And I think a lot of the business case around that, the way that they're able to do that is knowing that after X amount of time, they're going to get their money back on these folks because they're contributing revenue. Whereas I think internal security teams have a tougher business case to make because they're seen as a cost center, not revenue generators, and so and that's a broader issue, the whole cost center problem. But yeah, I think that's part of it. So that's why I've always been a huge advocate of every consulting firm, MSSP, anybody who has, client facing people, they should always be building this pipeline of growing their own. That way, every time they need to hire, they're not going out to the market and overpaying and having their positions open for way too long because they've spent the time on the front end and done some pre-planning to be constantly moving people through that pipeline.
I was going to say, we're talking about, the talent pipeline and getting the campus recruiting into, consulting firms, MSSPs. I've also I haven't gone down this path myself, but I understand the government is also an interesting entry point for candidates. Certain government agencies have recruiting programs from, campuses, and they recognize that they actually need to be doing that to get the talent because they know that sometimes they can't provide the other bells and whistles that industry can. But if you can get in and start getting experience and maybe start building a career as a civil servant, there are different perks that come with that. Just depends on what you're looking for in your life and your career. But I've heard and I've just heard that's an interesting way for folks to get into the career field that may be a less barrier to entry than trying to get right into corporate America that has the problem with a cost center and needing everyone to sprint day one.
Yeah, I think it would be great in an ideal world if the government was able to step in and say, look, we recognize this is a national security issue. We need to be developing this talent. We understand that the industry isn't stepping up to train these people. We need to do something. The problem that I've seen with some of the initiatives by, say, CISO is that apparently it's very tough to get all the way through these things. There's giant wait lists. There's a lot of red tape, and it just doesn't move as effectively as a private sector organization. And that's a huge turnoff to anybody who's young and hungry. They don't want to wait a year and a half to get into this program. They want to start making an impact right away. So I think if they could figure out a way to fix that, that would be awesome. And any apprenticeship period, I think is a great move. And folks that are trying to get it in the field, they should, beggars can't be choosers, as they say. Exactly. When I do my career guidance calls with people that are trying to break in, I advise them, look, if you get the opportunity for an entry level job, don't be picky, take it, or somebody else will, because there's so much competition. And I think another problem too is mismanaged expectations. Everybody, they've been sold this lie by the certification companies and boot camps and degree programs that, make 100K in security. There's 4 million unfilled security jobs. When the reality on the ground is so much different, that these folks are thinking, well, I can hold out. I do deserve the 80, 100K job because, that's what I'm worth. That's what they're telling me. When you go through it, what are your thoughts on that, phenomenon?
No, I think there's definitely a story that's been told out there that isn't exactly reality. And it's unfortunate because there's a mentee that I have that is highly qualified, has gone through and gotten tons of certifications, has even done these labs and things like that. And they can't, for the life of them, get their foot in the door because there's just so many applicants. There's just also some odd requirements, like you need this certification. Well, I can't get that certification unless I actually have some years of experience. So it's kind of a conundrum there. But to your point, like earlier in your career, you can't be picky. And so when I got into cybersecurity, I was told, hey, listen, like we're going to give you a shot, but you need to be the weekend nights security operations center analyst. Well, I mean, that meant my Fridays, my Saturdays, my Sundays, and a good part of my Mondays were like at night. Like I didn't have a social life, so to speak, during the weekend. But I was like, this is an amazing opportunity. Someone's going to give me a chance. Yeah, you take it. Because you can't be picky when you're in your very beginning of your career, right? I mean, you can maybe, but then you just realize it might take longer to find that role. Whereas if you're open to more roles, you're open to not just remote, you're open to coming into the office, even if you're open to potentially relocating for a position that might not be where you're at right now, but maybe in a different market. Those are things that you got to keep on the table. As the more picky you are, the more the funnel gets narrow and narrow as to what options you have available, versus if you're less picky, your aperture, increases and you increase your chances of success, right?
Yeah, and the same thing goes for the hiring side. And I see this all the time. Everybody wants to hire that unicorn. Well, the more requirements you add to the list of must-haves, the smaller the candidate pool gets and the longer your time to hire, the more expensive that person's going to be. So when I'm kind of doing a discovery call with a potential new client, it seems like half the time I'm just trying to adjust expectations with the company that's hiring, saying, before this call, I did a search to look for the people that you're looking to hire, given the requirements that you have on the job description. I went and looked. There's 5 people in the entire U.S. So given the size of that candidate pool, the chances that we're going to get one of those exact 5 people is very low. Now, if you drop this requirement or that requirement or open it up to remote, there's a million different things you can do to broaden the candidate pool. And as I always say, recruiting is a numbers game. So is job seeking in that way. The more outreach you do, the more people you contact, the more success you'll have on average over a period of time. And the shorter your search time will be. And but at the same time, there's a quality aspect to it too. Some people I've talked to, they'll say, I applied to 2,000 positions and I got one interview out of those 2,000 applications. Like, well, maybe time to adjust your strategy a little bit.
Exactly. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity, right? So what would you say, being on the recruiting side, what would you advise those folks who are looking for those entry-level jobs but can't seem to get their foot in the door? I think you had mentioned it, but I'm just kind of, asking it more directly. Or the person who's applying 1,000 times and only getting one interview. Like, you on your side, what is your expert advice? Maybe 3 main points or 1 or what have you. Because I think people are hungry to understand what should they do differently, or what do you see as a recipes for success for folks?
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of advice out there for folks that are job seekers. And part of the genesis of this podcast was to try and talk to hiring managers about how can we actually open up more jobs for these junior folks, because I think that's the biggest problem. There's just not enough jobs for all the really talented people that have home labs and have an IT background and all these things. So there's only so much you can do. At the end of the day, it's about volume, but it's also about quality of connections. So these days, I tell people that, you can apply to jobs online, but for the most part, it's largely a waste of time. The exception to that would be if there's a job that you've researched very well, people that work there, go ahead and apply to that job and then go find the hiring manager on LinkedIn, connect with everybody over there. It requires more effort these days to stand out than just sending an application, basically. So you can do that through, one, sprucing up your resume to look like it's got security all over it, whether it's volunteering at B-sides or going to IC2 chapter meetings, that sort of thing. Get really engaged on LinkedIn. It's never too early to start building a LinkedIn network. I've been talking to a lot of CISOs and senior directors and such of security. And a lot of folks I've talked to had kind of neglected their network over the last few years because they were relatively comfortable in the roles that they were in. But then all of a sudden they got laid off, or something happened where they needed to start job seeking, and they realized in a very unfortunate way that they had neglected their network, and they didn't have any ways to drum up interest in their background as an employee. So networking is key, both in person, video. I always tell people the best thing you can do is meet people face to face. People remember a face and associate that with your name. That'll go much further than being an anonymous avatar, on LinkedIn if you actually met somebody. So those are just some quick ones, I guess.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think only one job in my entire career I've gotten without a referral, without someone saying, hey, like, hire Joey. And then they reached out to me and was like, hey, this person I trust, the person I trust recommends you. So therefore I trust you. And like, you're someone that I'm going to just basically get a chance and not even really have to interview sometimes for the role. Or you just go through the process for the sake of, making HR happy, because that's what it is. And so making those connections, not just applying and not trying to follow up and find out who the recruiter is, find out who the hiring manager is. Like, they may be inundated with messages, but I mean, what's the harm in sending it, I guess? But really, is there someone at that company that you already know, or maybe as a secondary connection through LinkedIn, you can ask for an introduction through your network? If you're at, if you went to college or anything like that and have any alumni connections, for military folks, like service connections definitely helps, especially, Marine Corps connections. Marines always look out for other Marines. So, and different services look out for each other as well. So just leverage anything you can to get your foot in the door and get your interest noticed out of the pile of several hundred resumes that are being sent to recruiters.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thought of something else. So there's so many online communities now where security people hang out that you wouldn't have had even 10 years ago. I have a long list of Discord channels that are specific to like every subdomain of security. There's DFIR, there's offensive security, security operations. There's a cyber jobs hunting Discord. There's subreddits. There's all these places where security people hang out. And a lot of these locations online also have mentor-mentee sections. So I would say that's another good way, is find a mentor. There are people out there, at your level and leadership of all different levels that are willing to mentor people. And if usually these mentors are very well connected. And so if they have either particularly impressed with, they can easily refer that person to their colleagues that are hiring, even if that mentor isn't hiring. And a lot of these entry-level jobs aren't even posted. They don't need to, because they already have some mentee recommendation from, somebody else they already know. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Connections are everything. What about on the hiring side in your experience? We talked a little bit about the unicorns versus, hiring at the junior level. Are there any particular challenges that you've encountered over the years, and have they been recurring at all?
Honestly, I take a different perspective from a hiring perspective. When I started in my role, I think there was a few other folks that were in the company already, and I needed to build a cybersecurity program from scratch. And I went through all the processes of working with executive leadership and the board to develop a vision, mission, strategy, and then a roadmap that supported that with people, process, and technology, and got buy-in to hire, a set of team members. And, I don't know, maybe I was just lucky, and maybe, I don't know, but we grew a team from a few people to over 25 in a matter of a year. And we didn't really face challenges in doing that. I think we just knew that, one, we wanted a diverse applicant pool. And so when we're working with our inside recruiters, we were saying, we want a diverse applicant pool. So number one, that's one of our requirements. And number two, not everyone needs to meet all of the requirements. Here's like some of the must-haves. And then here's the things that we're willing to compromise on and train on and hire people into stretch roles so that they can grow their career. And my leadership team and I took that approach, and we found great talent. And as a result of hiring talent into roles where they were able to stretch themselves and learn, we also had great attrition rates and great favorability and feedback. And so I don't know, but I do understand that the market has changed a bit over the past year and a half, especially with the massive layoffs. And it's really unfortunate what is happening in the industry with the layoffs. And, there's a sector that's laying off a ton, and there's another half that's wants to hire a ton. So how do we just shift, those folks over to those jobs and get them in, right? But anyways, we can't, what I'm trying to say is, if you're seeing the problem from the same perspective all the time and not trying to iterate and adapt and overcome, then you're going to be facing the same challenges. So you have to, again, realize that you have to adapt to the market. You have to adapt to the scenario to get good talent in. And I think the reality is these days is that what leads to meaningful work and meaningful jobs is the ability to stretch into a job where you can still learn, but yet make some immediate value. And that, I think, Pete, you'll probably correct me if I'm wrong here, that also shows that people are happier and you retain people more. You have less turnover. And so if you take that approach from the beginning, you actually find that you have people that I'm on a Mac, so it did the little thumbs up. I got to keep my hands down. People stay longer, and therefore you don't have to fill those positions again. And so the cycle doesn't have to repeat itself as often. So anyways, that's kind of my perspective and my experience, at least over the past 3 years.
No, that's great. And it's really great to hear that somebody has not really struggled to hire. It seems like most folks I talk to, they'll have some sort of recurring challenge. But I think you really hit the nail on the head there as far as why you were able to have so much success. And it didn't prove much of a challenge. It's because you were hiring people in the stretch roles. I think the default for a lot of people is we got to hire somebody who's done this exact same job before, held the same title, worked at a similar company, and that we know since they've done it before that they're going to be capable of doing it here. The problem with that is people that are highly motivated, that are very talented, they don't want to make a lateral move. Mm-hmm. They want to take a step up. And I talk about all this, that all the time. If you constantly look at hiring people into those stretch roles, like you said, you're more likely to maintain their tenure longer. They're not going to drop out as quick. They're going to be more engaged because they're more challenged.
Well, Pete, what I would say is when I think about hiring talent, I think about, well, what do I look for in my next job? I don't look for the same job I did in the same industry at the same level. No, when you start to look as a leader for your next role, you want career progression. And so you want someone to hire you into a stretch role. And so you should have the same perspective of those who you're hiring onto your team, right? Treat others as not only you want to be treated, but they want to be treated. And so it's just this, just reality that if that's what I want in my career, then obviously other people probably want that too. And so I should hire them into stretch roles to provide them that career progression and that meaningful sense of work and fulfillment, and not just into you did X here, I want you to do the exact same thing here. That's no fun. That's not moving someone up in their career. Sure, it might come with a little bit more salary, but I think we have realized that salary isn't the thing that keeps people at jobs. Sure, you need to be paid equitably, but once you just remove that from the table, it's more about these other things about career fulfillment, challenge, being mentored, moving up, learning new skills. That's what keeps people more motivated and satisfied. And then also having great leadership who recognizes that those are the pieces that keep people at companies and within their team, or even people that want to then go to wherever that leader goes next. And it's hey, this person looked out for me. They always challenged me, put me in the stretch roles. I want to go work for them because I know that's just their leadership mantra and what they do. And it's just thinking, what do I want when I look for a new role? Well, I need to recognize that and realize that other people want that too.
Absolutely. That practice, I would say for sure you're 99% of the way there as far as getting really good people and keeping them on board. Another aspect I think a lot of companies and hiring teams get wrong is making assumptions and not treating each candidate like the individual that they are. There's, for instance, and I talk a lot about biases because I think it's a big problem standing in the way of really good people getting hired, just because some sort of assumption is being made about that individual based on their job title or where they worked or how old they are or all these different things. So I can give you an example. One candidate I had interviewing recently, he's a manager at a consulting firm, had been managing people. I mean, it was in his title, had direct reports, was managing all these projects, super sharp, super motivated, used to working at a fast pace, highly intelligent. And I wrote all these things down in my notes. And the client I was working with, they were concerned because they wanted somebody who was managing people, and that candidate did not have that line about managing people at the top of his responsibilities. It was in the middle of the responsibility. And that was for that person to be doubted. It didn't even occur to me because I talked to the guy and I know how good he is, so of these soft skills and things that matter so much more than some of these other little things, you can only know by talking to somebody. I think a lot of really good people are getting caught before they get to that recruiter screen, and they're able to really impress that recruiter or whoever screens that person for the first time. So I think that's the biggest problem we have right now is the signal to noise ratio, and they're not getting an audience basically. Because if they had that audience, they'd have the chance to shine.
What do you think about also the thought in the industry that if you see someone who's been in a job for maybe a year, 2 years, a year, 3 years, and it's like, wow, they're a job hopper. It's like, well, but this day and age and the current culture, like, number one, I think we've seen over the past year and a half that companies by and large are going to do what they need to do. What's best for them. And there's the sense of loyalty just isn't as much there anymore. Right. So this whole idea that you're going to go to a company and work there for a decade or more, like that's often not happening a lot. And so people often change jobs for more challenge and diversity of background and experience. And I'll tell you a story. Like a couple of years ago when I was hiring a leader for our GRC team, I was hiring 3 different candidates. One person had been at their organization for 15 years. The other person had been at various organizations over a course of 15 years. And then I think the third, I forget, but let's just focus on the 2. And I ended up interviewing those 2 candidates, and I was more impressed with the person who actually moved around a little bit more and got a sense of different skills and abilities and experience in different environments because they actually learned more and they had broader perspective than the person who actually was loyal to their employer and stayed there for 15 years. They only knew the thing that they had done at that one place and didn't have a diversification of experience in different industries, different types of organizations, different type of problem sets. And so I think we also need to realize that people moving around in their career isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's actually potentially a value proposition for someone that you're looking for to bring a fresh perspective to a team because they have seen more, they have more diversity, and they might be able to challenge status quo or organizational type echo chamber thinking. And that's why people bring in consultants, right? Like you bring in a consultant because they have a broad breadth of experience and you want to gain that perspective. And so we should look at that a little bit more. Now, I'm not saying someone who's been at like 3 month, but there might be a reason for that. Like if the person otherwise seems very qualified and like an amazing candidate, well, let's understand why that might be. Maybe there's some personal things. Maybe they've just been a serial contractor and that's just what they like to do. And now they want to have more stability in their career and they want to go full time. But don't make assumptions. And I think it was your point, right?
Yeah, I would say it's really rare the person that has truly shown a pattern of job hopping to where it would be an issue for a company that's treating that person right. I think everybody has their own motivators. And if a company and hiring manager is able to hit those motivators well enough and be a good employer and treat people right, that person's going to stick around. It doesn't matter what they did in the past for the most part. Again, there are exceptions to every rule. But people that have jumped around every job for a year for the last 10 years might stick around for 10 years with the new company because the new company is actually treating them right. There's just no way to know until you talk to somebody.
And it's about the challenge, right? Sometimes folks have moved around a bit because maybe they were at smaller organizations or organizations that just didn't allow them to move up. And after a year or two, they were hungry for more. They weren't just wanting to sit around and, just do the same old thing. And they were hungry. And so the only way to move up or into a new role was to go to a different organization because that organization didn't support, or there wasn't enough, moving of the deck chairs so that people could go into different roles within that organization. And to me, I want someone like that because that means that person's hungry. They don't want just the status quo and show up and earning a paycheck. They actually want to earn their paycheck and be challenged. And I can then hire them into that stretch role and they're going to love it and succeed at it because they're going to be curious about how to learn. They're going to be proactive. They're going to be someone who hits the ground running and breaks down barriers towards learning that new capability or that new skill that I hired them in for, knowing that, you have a good foundation, but you need to stretch into this and we're going to help you get there.
Yeah, and I think too, as an organization, as an industry, we all tend to default to wanting to hire the folks that want to do the stretch roles and really reach and be challenged, and they're hyper motivated and things like that. I think another thing that as an industry we could do better about is figuring out what to do with the people that aren't like that, that aren't necessarily quote unquote rock stars, but are solid employees that are reliable, that will come to work every day, do their job, do a high quality job, not talk back to the manager, things like that. Do you think that there's a place for those folks in the industry? And
100%, wherever they feel like they want to excel and succeed. So for instance, I've been at many companies where I joined and the person had been there for 5, 10, 15 years, and they were content with doing the job that they were doing. And they were really good at the job that they were doing. Their priorities in life were to go to work, do a great job, satisfy their team's goals and their business objectives. But then, that was their work ethic. But their main focus was family or maybe a separate hobby. And so that's fine. Like if that's what you want out of your career and you do your job well, that you can be in that role for as long as you want. I'm going to continue to ask, hey, are you sure you don't want to maybe try this out? Are you sure you don't want to do that? Or let me know when you're ready to maybe do something else and you want to dip your toe in maybe a different area of cybersecurity. Or, hey, listen, I understand you want to stay in, let's just say like an identity and access management role. But why don't you at least continue to go to conferences so you stay up to date with the trends and the things that are changing in that space so that you are a thought leader in your role at the company? I think there's definitely a place for those team members on your team, and like those are highly valued team members as well. But then there's the other ones who are hungry, who want to move up, who want to try different things, and those are just as valuable. It's just they're different types of people, and like that's what leaders need to find out, right? Is what makes your people tick, what satisfies their career fulfillment, and then cater to that and enable them to be happy where they are or where they want to go. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not that type of person, so it's a little bit hard for me to identify with it, but I totally respect it and enable that to happen for those team members that are like that.
Yep. Yeah. And I guess that was kind of my point is I think there is a place for almost everybody in the industry, the exception being people that are maybe averse to learning. I don't know how many of those folks are out there, but if you're averse to learning, security probably isn't the right field for you.
No, it's changing every day.
but if you're, I guess, completely fine doing the same job every day and, just want to put in your hours and do the work and do a good job, I don't see any problem with that. But, like I said, I think we default to everybody wants to hire the rock star, the unicorn, the, type A person, that sort of thing. But even things like that really restrict your candidate pool because there's only so many of those folks out there,
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you're hiring for a niche skill set, that candidate pool can get pretty narrow. Have you ever had a position that you needed to hire that was, extremely limited in terms of the size of the candidate pool?
Yeah, but I before we move on to that, I want to say if you end up filling your team with all of the same type of personality, you also have a different problem because you have a lack of diversity, a lack of thought, just a bunch of type A's in a room. Like, I think we've all seen how that goes, right? We need some type B's, and we need these different types of personalities, the introvert versus the extrovert, like all these different types. And that's what makes the world go around. That's what makes great teams is by you as a leader knowing how you hire to complement one another and not just hire the same type of person over and over again, because that just creates its own problems, right? So yeah, we need to be thoughtful of that. Your question was, have I seen a position? Yeah. The reason why identity and access management came up is because, I told the story earlier that we didn't, in my current role when we were building our team, we by and large didn't have a problem filling the role. The one role that we did have a problem filling was the identity and access engineering role. Identity access management is at least it was then, I still believe it is now, a very niche career field. I don't think there's probably enough that really understand identity access management, and more organizations are coming around and realizing the identity is like the bedrock of your security program. I was listening to a podcast the other day where, we should reorder the CIS top 10 or top 20 or whatever it is now. Like the first one is asset management. Well, I think maybe we should actually be at a point where identity and access management and protecting your privileged accounts should probably now be number one, maybe. And who knows? Like we may need to rethink what we're doing. And because of that, identity engineers that know how to use some of the top end platforms or just understand the concepts and how to deploy them with minimal tool sets it is just very hard to find and very competitive.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Even in this market, there are a fair number of good IAM people that are on the market. I just talked to a guy yesterday that was, laid off from the Big Four. So crazy times for sure. A lot of turnover, good and bad in the market right now. Well, we're coming up on time here, Joey. So just one last question for you. Is there anything that we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
No, I think we hit on a lot of it. Let's look at the problem differently. Like, if you're having the same problem filling roles on your team, then it might not be the candidate pool. It might actually be your hiring process and the way you're approaching the problem and looking at the problem. So maybe just be open to realizing that there are different ways. Change your methods, update your methods with what the current workforce and the talent pool is looking for. And also the whole, hiring entry-level folks to try to stop this momentum of, well, we don't have any roles for those on our team like that. We got to fix that somehow. And, I don't have maybe the direct answer other than being more open to it. But I think we covered a lot of great things on this chat that I wouldn't add. I think it was great.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate your time, Joey. Thanks for being a guest here. And if people want to keep up with the work that you do, what's the best way to do so?
Just look me up on LinkedIn. Joey Rashid, JoeyRachid. I try to be more active. It's one of my New Year resolutions to post at least like once or twice a week. I don't know that I'm actually gonna get around to it this week, but I'm trying to and build more of a presence there and engage more with the content. So, but yeah, just look me up there.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for your time, Joey, and thanks everybody.
Appreciate you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat.
Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.